Hello, Brian.
Hi, Mohit.
Hello, Gaurav.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening. Am I clearly audible?
Yeah,
Yeah, all good.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. So you guys look good. Namaste and welcome to this series of webinars. Brian, you've done a fantastic job last time showcasing your work in Kashmir. And today it's all about Ladakh. And we have people joining in. So we'll give them a few more minutes. Welcome Pramod ji, Kuldeep ji, Jyoti ji, Bhaskar da, Sujata, Sharada, Pushkar, Meera, Paul. Welcome to to Brian's webinar today on birds of Ladakh, birds and wildlife of Ladakh. And it's really nice to see you all here today. And we're just going to give a few more minutes before Brian can get started. And I'm going to quickly introduce myself, and I'm going to introduce Brian as well. And then we'll get Gaurav to introduce himself to you. And then we'll sort of take things from there. I just finished my dinner, so, this. Yeah, it's... So what time is it, Brian, in the UK?
In the UK, it's 3 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Right. So it's afternoon for you. Good.
Yeah, mid-afternoon.
So friends, a bit about Brian. I'll read it out to you. Brian has been interested in birds since childhood and has birded extensively in his home county of Worcestershire, where he runs the Worcester Birding Twitter page and keeps locals up to date with all the latest bird sightings. He also served as the county bird recorder for Worcestershire and found numerous rare birds over the years, including 4 species of ducks from North America, as well as many scarce migratory species. He has birded further afield in the UK and Europe and has developed a growing interest in the bird life of India since first visiting the country in 2016 and each year since. Founded the Birders Store in early 2009 as an online store before opening the shop in Worcester in 2012, where the business has continued to grow and now offers a huge range of optics, accessories, books, and DVDs for birders. Brian, I'd like you to later at some point of time mention about or talk about the equipment you used and what you find very useful in Ladakh, in a place like Ladakh. In terms of binoculars and scopes and whatever else that you used while you were there.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And friends, a bit about me, especially for those who are here for the first time. I am Mohit Aggarwal. I'm an experiential ecotourism specialist with a deep love for nature. I help people travel to some wonderful places in Asia. I'm on the board of Asian Ecotourism Network, and I've been trained by GSTC in sustainable tourism. I'm the founder of Asian Adventures, a 28-year-old travel outfit. It's the largest and #1 bird watching tour company in India. I'm also the founder of NatiNet, a digital marketing company that is working towards strengthening communication for ecotourism and conservation outfits. These companies are on a large mission to help Asian elephants with their corridors, free the Himalayas of plastic waste, help small wildlife NGOs, and conserve the ancient Himalayan temples. So that's a bit about me, and I want Gaurav to introduce himself now.
So namaste everyone, good evening. My name is Gaurav Nalkur. By qualification, I'm a wildlife biologist. I've worked with giant squirrels, I've worked with bird niches and communities in the Western Himalayas. And I am currently working as a sustainability coordinator with Asian Adventures, training to be an ecotourism specialist. I made the shift to wildlife tourism and ecotourism with an aim to use these as tools to aid conservation by spreading awareness. And for the past few years, I've been lucky to work with Mohit and Asian Adventures, who share this goal with me. Thanks.
Thank you, Gaurav. And I want to thank Salil and Gaurav and Priya and Fareen and everybody else in my team who have worked hard on these webinars. They bring this information across to you. They're the ones who work behind the scenes, and they are the nuts and bolts of the entire engine who work super efficiently. So thank you guys. Thank you for being a part of my team, and I'm really, really proud of you. So over to you, Brian, and let's get started.
Great, thank you, mate. Welcome everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. Let's get the slides up. So this is a continuation, really, of the last webinar that we did with Kashmir back in June. So we did 1 week in the first week of June. Myself and Deepak from Asian Adventures, we headed to Kashmir, and we had a wonderful week of birding there. And then after that, it was time to head to Ladakh. And Ladakh is next to Jammu and Kashmir. It was actually part of Jammu and Kashmir until 2019. And since then, it's been its own union territory, so completely separate now to Jammu and Kashmir. And a completely different landscape. Ladakh actually means the land of high passes, and the landscape really is one of high altitude, cold deserts, rugged mountains. So pretty harsh environment to visit, but nonetheless beautiful, really scenic. And due to its geographical location, it has many birds which are unique to India. It's at the sort of western extremity of the Tibetan Plateau. And the Tibetan Plateau, as you can see here, this is Ladakh highlighted in red, right at the far north of India. And the remainder of the Tibetan Plateau extends for thousands of miles to the east. And just in this far sort of southwest corner of the plateau is Ladakh. It's about 3 times the size of Wales for our UK viewers, just to give you a sense of context. And it has been long subject to dispute with its close neighbours, China and Pakistan. So there are areas which are sort of slightly off limits to, particularly to Western tourists, Western birders. But that has changed slightly, and this year there was a little bit more access, and we'll touch on that later in the presentation. So to get to Ladakh, there are 3 choices really. There's 2 motorable routes in, one from the south from Himachal Pradesh, and you can take the highway up from Manali, and that'll get you into Ladakh. Or you can take the route that we took, and that's coming in from the west from Kashmir. We took the main highway out of Srinagar, which then takes you across the sort of top northwest of Ladakh. But these routes are only motorable during the summer months, so really between May and October it's fine. But if you're visiting Ladakh during the winter months, then really your only option then is to fly directly into Leh. You can fly in from Srinagar, but most people come in from Delhi, direct from Delhi. And if you do that, then you will need to probably spend a little bit of time just adjusting to the altitude, because Leh itself is 3,500 meters. So it's a bit of a change if you're coming in directly from, say, Delhi. And then just to give you a bit of context in terms of the altitudes, I've put a sort of little chart together here. This isn't completely to scale, but at least it gives you an idea of the elevations involved. So there's my home city of Worcester, which is just 28 meters above sea level. And then you can see the highest hill near to me is 425 meters. So very small. And then the highest mountain in the entire UK is only 1,345 meters, Ben Nevis in Scotland. And then you can see this huge jump in elevation. And bearing in mind that Leh isn't up a mountain, it is pretty much in a river valley, surrounded by mountains. So this just gives you an idea of the difference in elevation to what many Western birders are used to. And then further on up, there's a few more. The main key locations that we visited Hanley and Shokar, around 4,500 meters. And then the highest elevations that we birded at, Warrilar and Tanglangla, well over 5,000 meters. So you can see that really you need to, that initial arrival in Leh, if you do fly in, then you're going to need a day or two to acclimatise to the altitude. And most people can do that within a couple of days. Just take it easy, and you can potter around and do some local birding around Leh. But at the higher elevations, I mean, certainly when you're over 5,000 meters, you still need to take it easy. It's a challenge, particularly if you see a bird somewhere in the distance and you're keen to sort of, ordinarily you just rush over and try and see it, but you can't do that at that kind of elevation. So it's a whole different experience. So this picture here, this image is pretty much where we left off at the end of the last webinar. This is the view back to Kashmir, and this is on the Zojila Pass, the high altitude pass between Kashmir and Ladakh. And you can see really why this route is only motorable during the summer months. This was the second week of June, and there was still quite a lot of snow and ice on the route up. Obviously, there had been some snow clearances, but you can see just the scale of that vehicle there, how deep the snow gets during the winter months, and obviously makes it completely impassable during the winter. And once you've negotiated all the hairpin bends, you then level out onto these sort of alpine plateaus. And this is on the main road, as I say, the main road out of Srinagar, heading towards Kargil, which is in the northwest of Ladakh. And then this is the border as you cross over into Ladakh proper. It's about 3,500 meters there. And then some of the first birds you see, some of the commonest birds on this route, will be things like red-billed chough. We saw plenty of those, and also the yellow-billed chough, or alpine chough as it's known in Europe. And often you see these feeding together too, and often very tame, particularly around roadside cafes. They would be, very tame, just come down for scraps of food and offer great views. And then another familiar bird is Eurasian magpie. This is the magpie that is familiar to those of us in Europe. But in India, it's a much scarcer bird, and pretty much only really found in Ladakh within India. But as you travel further along into Ladakh, they become increasingly common. And another bird that we saw from the roadside just before Kargil was Eurasian hobby. This was my first one of the trip, so that was nice to see. And then eventually, by the first day, the end of the first day, we reached Kargil, which is it's a convenient stopover. It's about halfway between Srinagar and Leh, about 200 kilometers between the two cities. It's the joint capital of Ladakh, and it's around 2,600 meter elevation, which is about as low as you go in Ladakh. So that gives you an idea of the landscape here. And it's very close to the Pakistan border. So those mountains right in the distance on the right-hand side, just beyond there is Pakistan. So it gives you a sense of just how close Pakistan is. And obviously there has been, issues in the past, but at the moment everything seems fairly settled. And this was Rafiq, who did a fantastic job of driving us up from Kashmir. He was also our driver in much of Kashmir, but he did a fantastic job of getting us safely to Kargil. And then the next day it was time to move on. And really we were heading to our main base in Ladakh, which is Leh. Most of our trips centered around Leh. And then you can see Leh there circled in pretty much in the center of Ladakh, in the Indus Valley. And we did some casual roadside birding on the way to Leh. And this is a typical scene. And along the Indus, you've got these vegetated areas, mostly poplar trees and scrub and bushes. And there were quite a few birds just to see as we drove on the way to Leh. So things like common rose finch, very common in this part of the world, and really nice to hear them singing from the trees. And also Oriental turtle dove was pretty common. We'd seen plenty of these in Kashmir, but they were pretty widespread along this route as well. And then this was a new bird, mountain chiffchaff. We had seen these a little bit further along the route, but this was the first one that showed really well and posed nicely for some photographs. A little bit similar to Siberian chiffchaff or common chiffchaff that you get in India, but much browner. Not so much in terms of olive or green tones in the plumage, and a pale lower mandible, yellowish lower mandible. So quite a distinctive little bird and a distinctive song as well. But these were very common all along this route to Leh. In suitable habitat, wherever there was vegetation, you could pretty much guarantee you'd see, or at least hear, mountain chiffchaff. And Hume's whitethroat. This is another common bird of this sort of terrain in these low scrubby bushes. We'd often hear Hume's whitethroat or Hume's lesser whitethroat. I think at the moment it's been lumped again with lesser whitethroat. So it's in a state of flux, really, the taxonomic position of some of these lesser whitethroats. But you can see it's quite a distinctive bird. Has a very plain face, and they were good to see. I think we did actually see one in Kashmir as well, but in Ladakh they're far more common. And this was another familiar bird, or at least it became a familiar bird the further we travelled east. This is hill pigeon, obviously very similar in plumage to rock pigeon, rock dove, but a little paler on the underparts. But the most distinctive feature of this bird is the tail. Particularly when they fly, you see it well. It has a sort of broad central white tail band, and then in this thick black terminal band. So very, very distinctive. And we'd often see flocks of these, particularly around villages and small holdings and on cliffs. You'd see small flocks of hill pigeons, far more numerous than the usually more common rock dove. And then further on, we got to the highest point on the Leh Srinagar road, which is Fatchula. This is another one of those high mountain passes, and I think this comes in at about just over 4,100 meters, something like that. So that was another landmark pass for us. And this was our first encounter of black-winged snowfinch at Fatchula. This became progressively more numerous as we travelled east. But as I say, this was the first encounter. In some of the older field guides, they refer to this species as Tibetan snowfinch, but it is a separate species. Tibetan snowfinch actually occurs much further east and isn't found in India. So this is the commonest snowfinch that we encountered in Ladakh. And then this gives you an idea of the landscape, the incredibly barren landscape. In places, absolutely no vegetation at all. Really, really stunning views as you pass over these mountain passes. This is just the other side of Lamayaru, heading towards Leh, and we were dropping back down into the river valley here. So this is back onto the Indus, and we just stopped here. We saw some. I spotted some house martins, and I thought I'd better just check them out in case they were Asian house martins, but they were the regular common house martin. And then we saw crag martin, and then Deepak spotted a wheatear right up on the top of the cliff edge there, up on the top left. So we were scanning for that. It was very distant. It looked really good for pied wheatear, and while we were scanning, we found this blue rock thrush. And again, this is a reasonably common summer visitor to Ladakh, but it was the wheatear we wanted to get a better look at. And as luck would have it, it dropped down right onto the riverside rocks and gave us fabulous views. So this stunning male wheatear was probably the highlight of our journey between Kargil and Leh. So that was a real nice bonus. It's a pretty rare bird in India, but they do occur in the summer in western Ladakh. So that was great to see. And then a little further on, thankfully the weather improved, much brighter, and this is a interesting place to stop. This is the confluence of the mighty Indus and Zangsar rivers. So the Indus coming in from the left there. This is the mighty Indus that carries on all the way through Ladakh, across the border into Pakistan, and then covers the flows for the full length of Pakistan and enters the Arabian Sea near Karachi. So this is a great sight, and you can just see the colour of the change of the colour of the river there as the Zanskar enters the Indus. And then just around the corner from there, only a few kilometres, is what is known as Magnetic Hill, and this is a local tourist attraction. And the idea is that when you look at the road, it appears to be sloping uphill. But if you park your car on the lines there in the foreground, your car will roll forward towards the hill. But of course, it is just an optical illusion. And if you look at this photograph and look at the road, although it looks as though it's sloping uphill in the foreground, if you actually look further down, it is sloping downwards. But yeah, it's an interesting experience and well worth stopping for. And then towards the end of the day, we have finally arrived in Leh, and Leh is the largest city in Ladakh. It's the capital of Ladakh, and also, as I mentioned earlier, it's where the main airport is. So if you're flying into this area, this is where you arrive. And as you can see, it's pretty well vegetated in Leh itself. Plenty of trees, so there's birds to be seen around Ladakh, but all around are high mountains. So there's a good variety of habitat all around Leh, and Leh is a really good base. It's very central. You've got good roads, good road access to all the birding hotspots of central Ladakh. And the first day we just stayed fairly local in the surrounding countryside, and this was a nice riverine habitat just beyond Leh, heading down towards Shea, and this is along the Indus. And you've got some fantastic habitat here, full of riverine bushes. And we were seeing things like blue throat, really nice views of blue throat here. This is the local race abatis, which is found in northwest India and western Pakistan. And we also had views of house sparrow, such a common bird, isn't it? It's found everywhere, and even from here all the way to much further east in Ladakh. Up to about 4,500 meters, we were still seeing house sparrow. Incredibly successful bird. So it was really nice to see those, a familiar bird from home. And also black redstart was fairly common in this area. This is the eastern race of black redstart, so much more orange in the plumage. And again, really good to see. And chukar were very numerous, particularly in sort of rocky habitat on the side of gentle sloping mountains and around villages and small holding cultivated fields. That sort of habitat. We had really nice views of this species. The further east we got and the higher we got, they tended to become much thinner on the ground. And once we got sort of above 4,000 meters, they were pretty much absent. But certainly in the immediate area around Leh, they were very, very common. So that was good. And two more common birds of this sort of habitat: rock bunting and red-fronted serin. Red-fronted serin, we were seeing those in reasonably good flocks. Rock buntings, maybe ones and twos here and there, but often you'd see them together. So this was a fairly typical scene around Leh. And then carrion crow. This is probably a bird that you would never stop for in the UK, but I saw two birds by the side of the road as we were driving along, and I quickly asked Deepak to pull over because this is a pretty rare bird in India. Again, Ladakh is pretty much the only place you can see it. So it was nice to catch up with this, and these were the only ones that we saw. So we got some photographs of these before we moved on. Ladakh, I think there are records probably further afield, but I think there's some confusion about this species and large-billed crow. So it's a little bit cloudy, really, what the exact distribution is of this species, but certainly not really found anywhere else in India beyond this sort of northwest corner of the country. And then another familiar bird from Europe that we saw was Mallard. And Mallard is, again, a very localized species in India, particularly during the summer, more widespread in northern India during the winter. We saw a few of these at Shea Marshes. I think one day we only saw 2, and then we went back a day or two later and there were 18. So Again, I'm not sure what the status of this bird is locally in Ladakh, whether it's breeding. We didn't see any evidence of breeding, but this area here certainly looked like it may well be holding some breeding birds. And that's Shea Marshes just in the foreground there, overlooked by Shea Palace. So a beautiful location to birding. And then the following day, we travelled a little bit further afield, about an hour's drive away, is Hemis National Park, or at least the northern edge of Hemis National Park. Hemis is a huge park. I think it's the largest national park in the whole of India. So it gives you some idea of the scale of it. As the sign clearly says, high altitude, so very, very mountainous region, and the main hotspot for snow leopard. This is where you would go to hopefully catch a glimpse of snow leopard. Although when we were there in June, it's really not the perfect time of the year, because they tend to go much higher up into the mountains. So as expected, we had no sightings of snow leopard. But there is Hemis, so it's to the southwest of Leh, up in the mountains. It's in the Zalskar range of mountains, so north of the Himalayas. Himalayas down to the southwest there, that a ridge of snowy peaks there. And while we were in Hemis, we had the company of PT, who did a great job in showing us the local hotspots in this area, and that's PT on the right there. And he took us up the first morning in Hemis. We went concentrated our efforts on Rumbak Valley. This is one of the more well-known areas of the park. And when we arrived, the weather was pretty grim, but thankfully it brightened up, and we headed up the valley dead ahead there, about a 2-hour walk up this valley. And we saw the first things we saw really were a nice selection of mammals. We had really, really good sightings of blue sheep. So this is one of the main food items, prey items of snow leopard. But as I say, snow leopard really is really tricky. They really do stay high up in the midsummer months. And then Uriel's a little bit quite a bit scarcer than blue sheep. These are a little bit smaller, and we saw 2 or 3 of these, but that was it. We had multiple sightings of blue sheep, but only 3 of these were seen. And Himalayan marmot is very common in Rumbak and pretty much everywhere else that we travelled when we were out and about in Ladakh. These were a familiar sight. And then eventually, as we climbed further and further up the Rumbak Valley, we reached the tiny one house village almost of Eurasian. And this is a homestay right up in as I say, about a 2-hour walk up from where we parked the car from Rumbak, in Rumbak village. And you can stay here, and we rested here for an hour or so, had lunch. Eurasian is around 4,200 meters, so it was good to have a rest there and have some lunch before we headed back down the valley. And on the way back down, we had really nice views of golden eagles. There were probably 4 or 5 birds in the valley during our time there. And we also had really good views of lammergeier, mostly in flight, but we got lucky with this immature bird came in and landed on a rock just above us. So we spent some time watching this magnificent bird, just resting. We also saw some adults, but I think by the time we got back to the bottom of the valley, we'd probably seen around half a dozen lammergeier. So that was very nice. And then the next day, we headed off in the opposite direction to Leh, to the north of Leh. We were heading towards the Nubra Valley, which is on the edge of the Karakoram mountain range, the second highest mountain range in the world after the Himalayas, and they sort of form the northern boundary of Ladakh. And to get to Nubra Valley from Leh, there are a couple of high mountain passes to negotiate, and we opted for Orilar. This was a really, really good choice on the behalf of BT, because he suggested that this would be a good area to look for snowcock. So we were up and away early in the morning, and we were scanning for both Himalayan and Tibetan snowcock, and we heard Himalayan. Although after much scanning, we couldn't actually find any birds, but nonetheless, there was plenty to see here. But this is around 5,300 meters, so even in June there's still plenty of snow and ice on the road. This is the very top of the pass. The road is just there to the right, and at this point it's really just it's nothing more than a sort of gravel track. Still ice covered there, as you can see, so pretty treacherous. And as I hinted at earlier, this is the sort of territory where you need to just take it steady, and just walk slowly, take lots of deep breaths, because even when there's tempting birds like this to try and see, you really want to get closer to them, but you just have to take your time and just not rush around. But this was probably the star bird at this elevation was white-winged redstart. This is their sort of this is where they hang out in these really high altitude mountain passes, and you get some really nice views. Pretty mobile, but nonetheless easy to see. It's a big redstart, bigger than black redstart. And another familiar bird of this sort of territory is robin accenta. They like these boulder-strewn high altitude valleys, and we saw plenty of these at Warrilar, just hopping around amongst the rocks. Pretty common, really nice to see, almost like very similar to a dunnock, but obviously the name named after our familiar European robin. And then another specialist of this terrain is Tibetan partridge. And not an easy bird to find. I mean, these are pretty scarce. And when you look at the plumage of these birds, it's pretty incredible. I mean, how that orange on the neck and the breast just blends in perfectly with the rocks behind. And you have to imagine this is obviously a close-in crop shot, but the whole of this mountain valley is covered in these rocks. They all look the same. So locating Tibetan partridge is no mean feat, and PT did a great job on locating these for us. Because it's not an easy bird to see. They're pretty much confined to Ladakh within India. So this is where you have to come if you want to see Tibetan partridge. And they're that well camouflaged for good reason, because there are plenty of these patrolling the mountainside. We had regular sightings of golden eagle here, as well as a rumback. Maybe every half an hour one would cruise up and down. We saw this immature, which came back and forth several times, and also an adult was in the vicinity. So you can see why these Tibetan partridges are so well camouflaged. And then a little bit further down the valley, this was probably just over 5,000 meters up, we saw this wonderful little owl. In India, again, it's pretty much restricted to Ladakh. This is the main stronghold, but it's a high altitude species in Ladakh. As I say, it doesn't occur anywhere else in India, so it's unlike the birds in Europe, which are found pretty much across lowland areas. Here it's 5,000 meters plus in some of the locations it occurs in. And also in the same vicinity was woolly hare. We saw quite a few of these on both sides of the pass as we came up and went back down. Again, another favoured prey item of golden eagle. And then the bird we were really heading to Nubra for was this one. This is really the bird that most people want to see when you visit Ladakh. This is a delightful little bird, white-browed tip warbler. And for obvious reasons, it's called a tit warbler. It looks sort of superficially like a warbler, but it has the habits of a tit. It's very, very active, constantly moving, often hanging upside down within the bushes like a tit. And then just when you've got a nice view of it, off it pops to the next bush. And they travel some considerable distance. They don't just stay in one bush feeding, maybe more like a warbler. They're all dashing all over the place. So very, very difficult to get a good view of, and even harder to get a nice picture. But after much persistence, this bird obliged, as it was carrying food, And just after I took this, it must have flown about it just flew probably 100 meters and then out of view, and I lost it, never saw it again. So, but there were several birds in this habitat. They seem to frequent these low scrubby bushes along the mountain streams in the north of Ladakh. And also in the same sort of habitat, we saw more red-fronted herons, plenty of birds displaying here, like this male. And then a little bit further on, as we got down to lower elevations, into some of the river valleys where there was some cultivation, we saw a few Oriental Skylarks. These are the only ones that we saw in Ladakh. It is possible also to see Eurasian Skylark, but that's much scarcer. But there do seem to be an increasing number of records from this part of the world now. And then we returned back towards Leh. And on the return journey, we were really lucky to see Mongolian Finch. We had already spent some time looking for this species, but without success. And again, down to PT and his sharp eyes, he spotted this small group of birds by the roadside. And we quickly did a U-turn and went back. And sure enough, it was a small flock of Mongolian finches, and they showed really nicely in the evening light. Not a particularly rare bird, but they're just difficult to locate because they wander around over a huge area, and this is where these birds were. So this is the sort of this sandy, rocky habitat that they inhabit. But the thing is, most of Ladakh looks like this. So trying to find a particular area for Mongolian finch takes some effort. So to see them just by chance by the roadside was a real stroke of luck. And then it was time then to leave the Leh area, and we were heading east about 160 miles to the southeast to an area called Hanley. And the further east you go, the landscape sort of opens up. You've got much lower mountains, less rugged, and the valleys open up more. So you've got more water habitat. So you've got these sort of high altitude lakes. We were starting to see a different range of species. So common tern was one of the first water birds we saw on our way to Hanley, and this is the local race Tibetan Lark, and this one is much darker on the underside than the birds that we get in Europe, but a fairly common summer visitor to Ladakh. And at the same spot that we spotted those common terns, we also saw some great rose finches, which was a bird I was really hoping to see. This striking male was feeding happily by the roadside and offers us some great views. There are actually several birds present, but this male and also this female, presumably a pair, they fed pretty much unconcerned as we enjoyed really nice views of those. And then we eventually reached Hanley late that afternoon. And as you can see, Hanley is right down in the far southeast of Ladakh, very close to the Tibet Chinese border. And until this year, in fact, it was off limits to foreign nationals. So many special birds that you could see here were unavailable to Western birders. So that was a real privilege to come here to Hanley. I think the only previous Western birders that had visited, certainly this year, were from Germany. So it was with a great sense of trepidation that we started doing our birding here, and we just stayed around the local village, really, just outside the homestay here. So this was an open area of stony ground just by the homestay, and some of the common birds we enjoyed here were things like horned lark. They were very common, and twite again, really nice views of twite. They were incredibly tame, sometimes showing down to just a couple of meters. So it's a long time since I've seen twite, even though we do get this species in the UK, particularly in the winter months. They've declined, so to get really nice, pleasing views of these pink-trumped males was a delight. And desert wheatear, again, another very common bird of this area. I've seen these before in India, in the plains, and places like Rajasthan where they winter. But to see these stonking full summer plumage males on breeding territory was again really good to see. But a new bird for me was this one, Brandt's mountain finch. and Hanley seemed to hold reasonably good numbers of these. These were just on the edge of the village, also known as the black-headed mountain finch for obvious reasons. And these were often seen feeding in the company of horned larks on this short grassy areas, and showed really nicely in the evening light there. So it was good to catch up with a few common and not so common birds. But to travel around Hanley, once you leave the confines of the village, you then need to be in the company of a guide. Hanley is obviously a sensitive area, not just geographically, but also sensitive in terms of the wildlife it's there. So the local authorities insist that you're accompanied by a local guide, and Padama did a great job in guiding us around Hanley over the next 2 or 3 days. So first thing the next morning, we are out on Hanley Plains, looking for some of the more special birds of this area, and these vast high altitude plains stretch for miles and miles. So it's really good to have some local knowledge to help you pin down some of these more specialist birds. And the bird that we were really hoping to see in this habitat is the Tibetan lark. Tibetan lark is pretty much only found, well, certainly in India, only found in the Hanley area. This is the main hotspot. And we had really nice views of Tibetan lark. Plenty of birds singing. I think they're pretty much absent during the winter months. I guess it's a summer visitor, although it's not clear where they spend the winter months. But they were certainly in full song during our time in Hanley. And as you can see, they're a big, robust lark, pretty much starling size. In fact, a little bit chunkier, obviously, with a big, robust bill. And impressive in flight as well when they do the song flights. Very powerful direct flight, low across the grasslands. And they also share these grasslands with more familiar birds such as common redshank. This was the commonest breeding wader we saw around Hanley. I think this is the eastern race of common redshank. A marginally longer bill maybe on these birds, but call-wise, they sounded very similar to the common redshank that we get in Europe. And also another common bird of the marshes around Hanley, ruddy showduck, and we saw several family groups of these birds. And also this beauty, citrine wagtail, again another common bird of the marshes around Hanley. This is the Tibetan race, Kalkarata. This is the only one that breeds in India, and then winters further south across the country. But also, if you visit India in winter, you will also see the greyback form Citriola, which is the one that we get turns up as a vagrant in the autumn in the UK. But this one, the black-backed race, is a high altitude specialist of this part of the world. And then the bird that everybody wants to see when they visit Ladakh is black-necked crane. This is the state bird, or the Union Territory bird of Ladakh, and for good reason. It's a superb bird, very impressive. It's highly revered in Buddhist traditions, and it's found really, well, certainly in India, it's found only in this southeastern corner of Ladakh, and it favours these high altitude marshes. It's the only high altitude crane in the world. A little bit larger than common crane, but in India, second only to Sarus crane. So it's a big bird, and you can see just how big it is. There's a citrine wagtail just crept into the picture in the right hand corner. About 15, I think there's about 15 breeding pairs in the whole of Ladakh. So not many. It is an endangered species. It has a high level of protection. And this was one of the one half of a pair that we found nesting just to the edge of Hanley. The other one was sitting on the nest, and this one was standing by watching guard. And I think during our time in Ladakh, we probably saw about 6 pairs on our travels, but this was the only pair that we actually saw nesting. And that was good. It was really nice to see. And I think this pair have now raised young. I think I've seen pictures on Facebook of this pair with young, so that's good to know. Another shot. You can never have enough pictures of black-necked crane. And this is the habitat they inhabit. This is Handley Marshes, so this is to the southeast of the village, and it's a wide open area. There's plenty of space for these birds to feed and rest. And as I say, they have a high level of protection here. And these plains are also home to a wide range of mammals. So we saw plenty of things like pikers and voles. Red fox was a fairly familiar sight during our time in Ladakh. This is the same species that we get in Europe, but this is the local race of red fox, so Himalayan red fox. Montana, I think, is the name of this race, but easily distinguishable from the Indian fox that's more widespread further south by that long, very long, bushy tail with a conspicuous white tip. And then much larger is Tibetan wolf, and this was unexpected. I wasn't really expecting to see one this close, but early one morning as we were heading out of the village, we found this animal by the roadside, and it was feeding on a Tibetan wild ass, which wasn't there the day before. So presumably the pack had killed it during the night, and this lone wolf was still feeding on it early in the morning, and it offered us fantastic views, an unforgettable experience. And when Tibetan wild asses aren't being eaten by Tibetan wolves, this is what they look like. This is a really common animal around Hanley. This is the western form, so sometimes known as Ladakh wild ass. But really nice to see these. And we saw these in plenty of other places as well, but probably the highest numbers were around Hanley. And the other mammal we were hoping to see was Pallas's cat. And Hanley really is a real hotspot for this species, but we had no success. And Padama showed us this den of Pallas's cat, and he knows that they're in this particular area, but we had no luck in seeing them. Had we seen one, this is what we would have seen. Pallas's cat is very, very distinctive cat, and I think it occurs in reasonably good numbers. And there have been regular sightings of it later on since I returned from India. Sightings have been regular around the village. So maybe next time we'll visit a little bit later in the season. And then this is a typical scene as we travelled around Hanley. You can see the nomads here, various camps scattered around with their pashmina goats, and then the rugged landscape behind. And while we were touring around, we just chanced upon on this fantastic Seiko Falcon. This was a bird that I wasn't really expecting to see on our trip. I'm not entirely clear on the true status of this bird, but we saw this one in the morning, and then incredibly later in the day we came across another one, and clearly a different individual to the first one. This one is heavily barred on the back, and a very bold, striking head pattern. So this one is probably of the race Vipers. The other bird there, the first bird, much plainer. So this may be of the nominate form Churug, but it seems to be a lot of individual variation with Seiko Falcons. But nonetheless, a great bird to see. And then a more familiar falcon, Eurasian hobby. This was our second one of the trip, and in this part of the world, I think this is a passage migrant. So in eastern Ladakh, it's just passing through. This was our initial view, and then we probably watched it for another 10 or 15 minutes, and it was just resting on the ground for much of the time. So I guess it was probably just breaking its journey. We also saw a few Himalayan vultures. These were probably more regular in central Ladakh, but we did see a few around Hanley, and this particular individual was actually circling over the carcass that the wolf had left behind in the afternoon, and it was taking quite a bit of interest. We didn't see it come down, but I guess it was just waiting for its moment. And then we also birded around some of the plantations of Hanley. There's some quite a few extensive willow plantations have sprung up, and we thought we'd have a look and see what we could find. And this was very unexpected. Grey-bellied cuckoo, a hepatic female nonetheless. So that was an added bonus really to this sighting. Again, I wasn't expecting this, but it's true status in Ladakh. I'm not sure. We have the full picture because it seems that it may be increasing, and possibly with the provision of these willow plantations, it's discovered this habitat to its liking. But when I posted this picture on the Ladakh Rare Birds Facebook group page, it transpired that this is possibly only the third photographic record of grey-bellied cuckoo in Ladakh. So it's either been overlooked, or it's just, as I say, increasing due to some of the habitat changes that are taking place around the village. And then this is a more expected species of this part of the world, Hume's lark, or Hume's short-toed lark. This is a summer visitor to the high altitude plateaus of eastern Ladakh, southeastern Ladakh, and these are pretty common. Once we had really nice views. This was the first bird we saw, but thereafter we saw several here and further on in the trip. And then this is another aspect of the habitat you find at Hanley. These low bushy scrubby areas, Karagana bushes, and these were the favoured habitat of Ticole's leaf warbler, a delightful little warbler, almost like a cross between a wood warbler and a willow warbler. They were fairly common in this low scrub. A little bit similar in appearance to sulphur-bellied warbler, but sulphur-bellied is generally more out in open terrain, rocky slopes, and tends to feed more on the ground, whereas these Ticole's leaf warblers were feeding in the bushes, and really quite confiding at times. And then another special bird of the Hanley area is ground tit, or ground pecker. Ground pecker is probably the better name. It was previously thought to be a corvid, and you can see the sort of resemblance to maybe one of the ground jays, but it's quite a bit smaller. But it doesn't really look like any crow. It doesn't look like a tit. I mean, if anything, it almost looks like a wheatear if you just ignore the bill. Often spend much of their time just pecking around on the ground, hence the name. But very active birds, and not an easy bird to see well. They often move really fast. They have this low direct flight, and once you lose them, then you sort of back to square one. You try to relocate them. So yeah, quite a peculiar bird, not just in terms of its appearance, but also its behaviour. But this is pretty much, if you want to see this bird, this is a high altitude bird, and in India, this is the place to see it, around Hanley. And then another special bird of this area is Eurasian Eagle Owl. This is a bird I really wanted to see, I think, because it's so scarce in India. Unlike its close relative, the Indian eagle owl, or rock eagle owl, which is widespread across most of India, Eurasian eagle owl is very localized and really confined just to these high altitude areas of Ladakh. Bigger bird, much bigger bird than Indian eagle owl, paler, and they lack the well-defined black borders to the facial discs, so it's a much plainer appearance. And as I say, huge owl. These, I think, the second largest owl in the world. They have about a 6-foot wingspan, so really impressive bird to see. And we got lucky with this pair, roosting early one morning in the sun there. And after a good 2 or 3 days of top class birding at Hanley, it was then time to move on, and we headed towards Shokar, which is another hotspot in one of the main hotspots in Ladakh. And this is the typical scenery as you head back towards Leh. Shokar is about halfway between Hanley and Leh, but on a different route. So these are some of the typical scenes. And as we got closer to Shokar, we saw our first brown-headed gulls. So this is a high altitude nesting gull, the only high altitude nesting gull in Ladakh. Other gulls do appear on passage, but this is the commonest during the summer months. And we saw plenty of these after we saw this first individual. But much scarcer in Ladakh is Indian pond heron, although it's very, very common across most of India. In Ladakh, it's a very scarce summer visitor. So we're quite lucky to see this in a high mountain stream on our way to Shokar. Although it was pretty much in the middle of nowhere, it was still sadly littered with all kinds of debris, which was quite sad really to see. But nonetheless, it seemed to be feeding well in this stream. And then eventually we arrived at Shokar, which is a high altitude salt lake, vast area. And when you see it in the distance and you're approaching it, it looks really inhospitable, and it's really desolate. I mean, you just think there's no life here at all. When you look at it from a distance, you can't imagine how anything would survive on the sides of that lake, given the high salinity of it. But again, it's another stronghold of black-necked crane, and we did see a few around the edges of the lake, and you can see the salt deposits there, and some of the salt deposits are absolutely enormous around the edge of the lake. But further south is a more productive area, and this is Starsukbuk, and this is a freshwater lake, much smaller than the main lake, but absolutely teeming with bird life. And we saw a really nice variety of water birds here, ruddy-shouled, greater numbers of brown-headed gull, bar-headed geese. They were all nesting here. We saw a single black-tailed godwit, which I assume was on passage, black-winged stilt, common tern, whiskered tern, and also good numbers of nesting great-crested grebes. This was the only place we saw great-crested grebe nesting. But also, surprisingly, a good number of black-necked grebe. I think we had about 17 or 18 black-necked grebes, all in full summer plumage. Most of them were paired up, so I'm not sure whether this is a breeding ground for them. We didn't see any nests, but I guess it's quite possible. So again, that was a really nice surprise to see black-necked grebe. And then on the south side of the lake, there's a village of some small dwellings, and all around it was covered in Brandt's mountain finch. So this is the one that we saw earlier at Hanley. But we had about 300 at this location, which was an astonishing sight. So again, I got some pictures of those, and this is a male. You can just about see the pinkish rump on this particular individual, which isn't easy to see in the field, but this distinguishes the male from the female. And then we saw the much scarcer Blanford's snowfinch. This is another high altitude specialist, but very scarce, much scarcer than the mountain finches and much scarcer than black-winged snowfinch. We only saw a handful of these, and they did take some tracking down. They're very mobile, not very approachable, but we did get we got some pleasing views in the end. So that was another new bird for me. And then Upland Buzzard, huge buzzard, eagle size, in fact, probably similar size to greater spotted eagle. And when you look at this adult bird, you can understand, you could be forgiven for thinking this is indeed an eagle. Very robust bird. This is one of the dark morph individuals, but like all buzzard species, they're highly variable. But we saw quite a few of the lighter morph birds as well. But these were pretty common around Shokar, around the margins. And then our third Seiko Falcon. Again, another one of the plainer looking birds. This had a very indistinct face pattern, so I'm guessing this is probably the nominate form. But again, a credible sighting, and this showed really well by the roadside, so that was really good to see. And then we were running out of time. We really needed to see a few of the target. The main birds that we really wanted to see were Tibetan snowcock and Tibetan sandgrouse. So early one morning, we were out looking for the snowcock, and were scanning this these rocky mountain slopes that surround the lake. Really hard going. I mean, it's high altitude, so you can't really rush around. You've just got to sort of hopefully pick the right spot and be persistent in scanning. And this is the sort of terrain that you're scanning, these large boulder-strewn mountain slopes. And in this picture, there are actually two Tibetan snowcocks, one towards the bottom left and one towards the top right. Not easy to spot at long range, but there they are nonetheless. This is the pair that we managed to find in the end. Well, the views were pretty distant, but we had a scope, so that helped. So this was just taken with the bridge camera, and to give you an idea of the distance, I mean, this is taken at 83 times. This was the maxed out on the zoom on the camera, but Tibetan snowcock nonetheless. So that was a really great start to the day. And then, as I say, the next special bird that we were hoping to see was the sandgrouse, Tibetan sandgrouse. And you can see the size of the challenge, really. This is the high altitude, arid, stony desert that surrounds the lake. And it's just vast. I mean, it's a real needle in a haystack job. And we spent pretty much the remainder of that day looking for Tibetan sandgrouse. And yeah, it's hard going. We saw some other wildlife while we searched, and this was a surprise when I had a good walk away from the vehicle in the hope of finding some sandgrouse, and I nearly trod on this little critter. This is Theobald's toad-headed agama, tiny little lizard, about 5 centimeters long, but superb camouflage. And had it not moved, I would never have spotted it. And it froze. It moved, it ran, and I had to try and relocate it, and luckily managed to quickly get this picture before it scuttled off again, never to be seen amongst all the stones. And horned lark, perfectly camouflaged juvenile horned lark here. Again, a common bird of this, just like at Hanley, was a common bird at Shokar too. So it was nice to get good views of a youngster. And then lesser samplover. This is a bird that, if you visited the coastal areas of India in the winter, is a familiar wintering bird. But this is where they head for in the summer months. These high altitude stony deserts. This is where they nest in around the lake. And really stunning plover to see close up. And this bird, we photographed this from the vehicle. It was quite inquisitive. So that was another nice bird. And the search continued. Unfortunately, we weren't there. We were there about an hour ago before that sandstorm came through, and you can see the scale of it. Those are army huts in the background, which we'd been searching that area for sandgrouse. And we failed. At the end of that day, nothing. And then we had an early checkout the following morning. We had to get back to Leh. It was the last full day in Ladakh. And we were heading out of Shokar, out of the village there. We checked out of the homestay, and just probably the last 200 to 300 meters of suitable habitat. We were driving through. The road out takes you through this terrain, and just by sheer luck, we spotted 6 birds feeding probably about 200 meters out in the desert there. And sure enough, they were Tibetan sandgrouse. We couldn't believe our luck when we thought everything was lost. There they were, and they offered us fantastic views. 6 birds in total, and yeah, we gradually crept towards them, and they carried on feeding. Pretty active, rarely stayed still, but really nice views. And that was one of the highlights of our time in Eastern Ladakh. And then really with that success, we were able to relax and enjoy some of the roadside birds. So young desert wheatears, these were the only ones that we saw, youngsters. And then we headed back towards Leh via Tanglang La, which was the highest altitude we reached. Tanglang La is over 5,300 meters, and stunning views from the top. Not an awful lot of birds. It was pretty windy while we were there, but we did give we gave the mountainsides a scan for snowcock. This is an area where both Tibetan and Himalayan occur. So we thought we'd give Himalayan one last go, but we didn't have any luck with that. Although PT has obtained some superb pictures of both species together, which is very unusual. get both birds in the shot. So if you go on his Facebook page, you'll see some lovely photographs of both snowcocks together. And then this is looking south from Tanglang La back towards Himachal Pradesh in the far distance. This is the other motorable route into Ladakh that I mentioned at the start of the presentation during the summer months. And then the view across to central Ladakh. You can just see Stok Kangri, the high mountain right in the centre in the background there. That's well over 6,100 meters. So despite the lack of wildlife there, it was nice to get these really nice clear views across the mountaintops. And then some final birds as we descended down towards Leh. We had our best views of white-throated dipper. In this part of the world, white-throated dipper is a high-altitude species. Brown dipper also occurs, but they tend to be lower down. And large-eared piker, just this one bird, this one piker I managed to photograph, and very similar to Royal's piker, which also occurs in Ladakh, but these have hairy ears, which Royals don't, so that identifies it as large-eared. And then my final new bird of the trip was brown accenter, our second accenter in Ladakh. We were heading just almost back to, just short of Leh, and I spotted this area of Karagana bushes, and I thought, well, it's worth a stop just in case. And sure enough, there were one or two brown accenters and ground peckers and things. So it was nice just to have some last-minute birding before we made our way back towards Leh. And this was the typical scenery. This is a bit further down Upshi, heading back on the main road between Tanglang La and Leh. And you can see the dramatic landscape here. Incredible. You could spend, take thousands and thousands of pictures of this sort of scenery. Every turn in the road presents you with a different dramatic view. And that pretty much concludes the presentation. I'd like to thank Deepak for all his hard work, not just in Ladakh, but also for our week in Kashmir. And also to PT for his guidance, and Rafiq, who drove us part of the trip, and to the other drivers, and also to Iqbal, who did all the behind the scenes work in sorting out the permits and the access arrangements, and also to Salil and Harpreet for their assistance in putting together this presentation. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Brian. That was a very good selection of photographs, and the information that you presented was really, really good. You've given everything you could in 1 hour. Well, whatever 1 hour could give, that was like really, really concentrated, and was good information. I just think Ladakh is facing over tourism, and there is revenge tourism happening. People with motorcycles and jeeps rallying around, not understanding the fragile nature of the landscape and how it can hurt the ecology of the area. So I think bird tourism or any such tourism is far more sustainable. And it's a good thing to do to empower more and more people. So PT is now building his team, cousins and friends, and empowering them to become better bird watchers, which is a low impact tourism, field as compared to a lot more things that people do there. Anyway, before I lose track of things, let me just ask you to reply a few questions that people have here. Neelam is asking, how many species of birds do you have in Ladakh?
I think the official list is around just over 300.
Yeah.
That includes a lot of vagrants, doesn't it? I think Ladakh is prone to attracting rare birds because of its location, but yeah.
Yeah. When Otto wrote his book down, I was with him for a short time in Ladakh, and it was 285, and then splits happened, and a lot more has been recorded over a period of time. So
it's a great book.
Yeah, it's a great book. So that's got 285, and I think we've sort of gone beyond 300 now.
Yeah.
And it's time for Otto to come out with a newer version. Avi is asking, congratulating you for great pictures and saying, which camera were you using?
It's a Nikon bridge camera, a P950, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's like a cyber shot. I have a P1000, and that works very well. Would you like to tell people about the scope and the binoculars that you were using and what you recommend?
Sure, yeah. The scope, I know we covered the binoculars last time, but the scope was the Swarovski ATS 65. So this is a lightweight portable scope, superb optics. But yeah, this was nice. And in the high altitudes, you just want something, you don't want anything heavy, particularly when you're lugging it around those mountain slopes looking for snowcocks and the sandgrouse and whatnot. But so that was a good choice to use. And then the binos were these ICE-FS SF1032s. Again, very light, good optical quality. Yeah, just as I mentioned in the previous presentation, it's the key thing in this terrain is keeping everything light and compact.
Wonderful. And if they need more information from you on various optics or equipment, then you could help, right?
Of course.
And if they are in the UK or if they are somewhere else, you can also ship them your merchandise. Is that right?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Okay, good. So if you can also put your email ID in the chat here, it'll be good for people to note that down. And it's if you can write the specs on the optics, it would be great. Sure, George, you can get in touch with Brian directly, and he'd be able to give you more information on that. Rakshit is asking, what are the negative and positive impacts of Ladakh tourism on wildlife? How is wildlife getting affected with the kind of tourism that you've seen there?
Yeah, we did see quite a bit of disturbance at Shokar. I think Deepak told me there was quite a lot of development taking place compared with how it was a few years ago. So that's clearly having an impact. I think there's more accommodation being built, more restaurants. So it's important to keep that sort of in check, isn't it? You want to get the balance right. You don't want it becoming overdeveloped and polluted, and because then you lose what you're trying to celebrate and preserve. It just it's counterproductive in the long run. But it's a fine balancing act, isn't it? But and I guess the off-roading as well is also an issue. It's important to stick to the main route, not deviate across the, just randomly traveling across the terrain.
I think Ladakh really needs to put some sort of cap on the numbers of people who come in as general tourists and people who come in as eco-tourists or for ecotourism or for nature tourism. And it's time that they start balancing. Because the way we've seen, the numbers growing there and the kind of hotels mushrooming everywhere, it will have very, very deep impact on the resources in that area, and it also sort of impinges into the privacy and the culture and the traditions of the people, when people just go for general tourism. So we got to be mindful. Mayank is asking which lens you used. So Mayank, I think he said that he's using P950, which is a Nikon cyber shot.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. Gaurav, what do you think about this presentation, and what do you have to say?
So, I mean, of course, it was an amazing presentation, great photos, and for someone like me who has never been to Ladakh, hasn't been to Ladakh yet, I would say, it's a great introduction to what you can expect in the different places. I think a lot of people go to Ladakh with this giant bird list, and they're disappointed that they don't see half the stuff that they targeted. But yeah, that was I think it was a great guide on what can be expected, and you mentioned how common some things were, and what are the kind of drawbacks. So not drawbacks, I would say, but the difficulties. For example, the camouflage Tibetan partridges, you said, would be very difficult to spot, as well as the Tibetan larks and things like that. So I think it was it was entertaining to see a lot of the photos, and at the same time, it was really informative from a prospective birder's
Yeah.
perspective.
And a lot hasn't changed in terms of its stakeouts and things like that. Of course, people have found more spots now. The first birding tour that I did was with some people from Sweden 22 years ago in Ladakh, and it was like, why are you guys looking at birds, and what is it for, and all of those sort of questions. So it was so we've come a long way, and I think it's important that you all save the replay link, which you're going to get tomorrow from Brian, from this webinar, which will be useful for you to refer to on your next visit to Ladakh, and you can always get in touch with him and with us for more information as you go along. And any other questions that I may have missed? If we have, I'm sorry, friends, we've run out of time. Avi, he traveled in June, is that right?
Yeah.
Brian,
That's
did you
right,
travel
yeah.
in June?
First 3 weeks of June.
Yeah.
So a week in Kashmir, and then
first
2
week.
in Ladakh.
Correct. And there's a lot of ground you covered and a lot of species you covered. So Deepak and you had a great time. So Deepak keeps talking about all the information, all the instances that you've time that you spent together. And I think it was really meaningful.
Good. Yeah, no, you did a great job, and it would actually be nice to be in Ladakh at this time of the year, because I guess we'd see a different range of species. We'd see a lot of passage birds coming through.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see what discoveries could be made in, say, September, October.
Yes.
Sure
In fact, he just returned a few days ago from Ladakh. He's been running these trips back to back, and then he's off to Ladakh again next month sometime.
Okay.
The last one was a snow leopard tour where we had a female with 2 cubs. So that was amazing in Rumbak.
Yeah.
Good. So I think I'll call this webinar off today, and it was a beautiful presentation, really meaningful. Thank you so much, Brian, for putting this together for this audience. And this audience, this is something which we're going to upload onto YouTube, and it will change the perspective of many people. It will help many birders. It will help photographers. It will help them see your point of view very differently. So thank you very much for bringing this forward, Brian. Very meaningful. Thank you very much. And thank you, Gaurav, for being here with us and putting this together. Thank you, team. Thank you, Asian Adventures team, for doing this. Thank you. Have a great time. And we will announce our future webinars to you in due course on Telegram and WhatsApp chats, and also through emails. Did you put your email ID down, Brian?
Yes.
Yeah.
Put that
Okay.
in. Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.